Good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful day. Now, as you probably figured out, this is not going to be our last day. We're not finishing the Synoptic Gospels today. It's probably going to take me 2 more days. So please allow me to continue to enjoy myself. And we'll have 2 more days. And then, so by Thursday morning, we should be done with the Synoptic Gospels. But I want to finish it properly. Amen. Father, we come to you this morning. And Lord, we worship you. Father, we bow our hearts before you. Jesus, we don't just call you Master. We call you Lord. We call you Savior. You're the lover of our souls, and you've done so much for us beyond we could even imagine. We come today. We ask that you open our hearts to the Scripture. Open our minds to the Scripture, Lord. Our simple little minds have a hard time with the words of a living God. Teach us. Let the anointing that rises up upon each one of us teach us and give us understanding. But Jesus, only you can open minds. Open our minds to understand. In your name we ask. Amen. Chapter 20 today, beginning with verse 1. One day, as Jesus was teaching the people, now again, when you read things in context, you understand this is Holy Week. Now, again, when you just sporadically read your Bible, you just, well, I'm going to read over here and I'm going to read over there and I'm going to read over here and I'm going to read over there. You lose so much understanding. As you read things through from beginning to end, as you read things through in context, you understand this is Holy Week, okay? One day as Jesus was teaching the people and preaching the good news in the temple. Now remember, he cleansed the temple and now he ministers in the temple every day during Holy Week. The leading priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. So 3 groups. 3 groups. The leading priests, that would be the members of the family of Caiaphas and Annas, the teachers of the religious law, and the elders. So members of the Sanhedrin court are there. So 3 groups approach him. And they demanded, okay, this shows attitude. Whenever you see people demanding, it's showing you an attitude. It's showing you an attitude of defiance. And this is something you have to learn as a leader to watch out for. Now, when people come and they're just asking questions, when people just come and they're wanting to talk about something, when people just come with an open, honest heart, that's a very different situation. But when you get people who come, first of all, in groups, and then secondly, showing attitude, this means you have a problem. All right. Now, if they just come up individually and ask questions, or a family comes up and asks questions, that's one thing. But when people approach you in groups, people use groups for safety. They attack in groups for safety. So these are things you have to learn as leaders. They demanded, by what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you the right? Now notice, authority simply means the right to do something. And authority has a source. Authority has a source, and this is a truth, okay? Authority has a source. You know, if you just stand out in the middle of a corner on Taft Avenue in the United Nations and hold up your hand, the bus is going to run over the top of you because the bus doesn't recognize your authority. Your authority has to be given to you. He said, let me ask you a question first. Did John's authority, okay, so we're asking who gave John the right to do something now? Who gave John the right to minister? Did John's authority, his right, come from heaven, or was it merely human? Okay, because John is not a Levite, and he's not from their groups. So who gave him the right to do this? Now, again, when people come demanding, you have to learn to flip the scale. And you flip the scale by asking them a question. Now, the reason you ask them a question is you do not answer people who do not want answers. You do not answer people who are not looking for truth. Don't answer people looking for a fight. It takes two people to have a fight. Don't answer people looking for a fight. Verse 5, they talked it over among themselves. Now notice that, among themselves. This is focus book answers. This is trying to come up with a woke answer. They're not looking for any kind of a truth. They're not looking for opening their hearts and answering something honestly. They're looking for a woke answer. Because they say, if we answer from heaven, he will say, why didn't we believe John? But if we say merely human, the people will stone us because they are convinced that John was a prophet. So they finally replied they didn't know. Now that's a lie. It's not that they didn't know, it's that they didn't want to say. Now, never answer people like this because, I'm sorry, they're not looking for answers. They're looking for a war. They're looking for a fight. Learn in leadership. Answer people with open hearts. Sit down and spend however many hours it takes to humble yourself and answer the questions of honest people. And again, I say humble yourself because as a pastor, there are so many pastors today that anytime the people ask a question, they say, oh, you're in rebellion. You're in rebellion. If people question, why do we need to do this? You're in rebellion. Why do we need the auditorium to be dark? You're in rebellion. Pastor, have you ever considered about putting some mats outside the lobby so that people could dry their feet on the way in during rainy season? You're in rebellion. Guys, you can't ever treat God's people like that. So learn to humble yourself and be willing to answer the good-hearted questions of people. But when you get these groups coming to you and groups for safety, showing an attitude, not willing to be honest with their own hearts, don't answer people like that. So Jesus responded, then I won't tell you by what authority I do these things. He said, in other words, Jesus said, why waste my time? You won't believe that John had authority from the Father, and so you're not going to believe that I had authority from the Father. Now, Jesus turned to the people again. All right, so he turned from the groups. Now, this would have been hard for these people to take. These were big shots. So Jesus turned away from the attackers and turned to the people again. Okay, these guys interrupted his teaching. So he turns away from the attackers and turns to the people. And again, this deals with your focus. Focus on the people, not on the nasty people attacking you. And he told them this story. A man planted a vineyard, leased it to tenant farmers, and moved to another country to live for several years. Now, I want you to notice something. He gave them an opportunity to earn. Okay? He leased it to them. He gave them an opportunity. He didn't have to do this. He could have just sat on his money. But he did something that would give people an opportunity to make a living. At the time of the grape harvest, he sent one of his servants to collect his share of the crop. Just like here in the Philippines, we own a rice field in the province and we've leased it out to tenant farmers, or we've leased it out to a relative. And at harvest time, we go to get the sacks of rice that are due to us. But the farmers attacked the servants, beat him up, and sent him back empty-handed. So I want you to notice hirelings attack stewards. All he wanted was his share of the harvest. Hirelings attack good stewards. Okay? Let's call this loyal stewards. They were doing what they were asked to do. Just doing what they were asked to do, and they got attacked. That's not fair. They're just doing their job, diba? So the owner sent another servant, but they also insulted him, beat him up, and sent him away empty-handed. Again, loyal people attacked just for doing their job. A third man was sent, and they wounded him and chased him away. One of the things you're going to have to learn is hirelings fight for total control. Hirelings will always fight for total control. What will I do? The owner asked himself. I know I'll send my cherished son. Surely they will respect him. But when the tenant farmers saw the son, they said to each other, here comes the heir to the estate. Let's kill him. Now notice, they didn't kill these other guys. So hirelings attack loyalty, but they kill heirs. They kill the sons of the house. Now that's something you're going to have to realize. This is the heart of a hireling. They will attack loyalty, but they will kill the heirs. They will kill the sons of the house. Now you go meditate on that one for a while. So they dragged him out of the vineyard and murdered him. What do you suppose the owner of the vineyard will do to him? Do to them? Jesus asked. I tell you, he will come and kill those farmers and lease the vineyard out to somebody else. Okay, so please, God wins. And I watched this ever since I got born again. Jesus is Lord. Now sometimes in the ministry, we see things that we know aren't right. We see hirelings rising up and destroying loyalty. We see hirelings rising up and killing sons of the house. But I want you to understand Jesus is Lord, and it is his church. This is his house. And you have to learn to have faith in him. You have to learn to trust him. How terrible that such a thing should ever happen, the listeners protested. And he looked at them and said, all right, this then is what does the scripture mean? The stone that the builders rejected has now become the cornerstone. Everyone who stumbles over that stone will be broken to pieces, and it will crush anyone it falls on. Now, again, I get this verse. Jesus is the cornerstone. This is one of those verses I've got lots of question marks about. Now, I know I've read all what the theology books say, but there's theology books, and then there's coming to a settled understanding in your own heart. Revelation comes from God. And one day I'm going to understand that verse. People who stumble over Jesus are broken into pieces. I get that. But I want you to also notice it will crush anyone it falls upon. This stone that the builders rejected, this Jesus who was the heir, this Jesus who was the son of the house, this Jesus, anyone he falls on, it will crush. Now, again, you look at that, and how does that fit with the mercy of God? How does that fit with the grace of God? How does that fit with salvation by grace? How does that fit with the patience of God? There's a lot of things that sometimes you and I, we've gotten away from the justice of God. And we're going to have to understand God is a just God. The teachers of the religious law and the leading priests wanted to arrest Jesus immediately because they realized, that he was telling this story against them. So again, they're still standing there. Now, he's no longer speaking to them, but they're still part of the crowd. He realized that he was telling that story against them. They were the wicked farmers, but they were afraid of the people's reaction. Religious politicians. Remember, politics is a two-edged sword. They want to get the favor of the people, but they are also afraid of the people. Now, the difference between a religious politician and a pastor, both want to be loved. Both want love and loyalty. But the pastor is not afraid. Pastors understand we're going to face rejection. Please, straight up, there will be people who won't come back to church next Sunday because of what I preached about stop the drinking. Okay, there will be people who won't come to church. But at some point, you can't be afraid of people. Now, you don't want to be belligerent. You don't want to be harsh. You don't want to be nasty. Please, you don't want to be condemning. But the difference between a religious politician and a pastor is a religious politician is very careful about his words or her words because they're afraid of the people. A pastor just teaches truth. Watching for their opportunity, the leaders sent spies pretending to be honest men. Okay, so I want you to look. Enemies, number one, look for opportunity. Now, in this world that we live in, forgive me, if Jesus tarries and you are all building great churches one day, you're going to have enemies. And those enemies are going to just sit there and smile at you. They're going to smile at you like a snake smile. And all they're waiting for is an opportunity. They're waiting for something to create an opportunity for them to get in and drive a wedge, to get in and hurt you, to get in and do you know what I mean when I say a gotcha moment? They're looking for the gotcha, I got ya. They're looking for the gotcha moment. So the enemies are always looking for opportunities. And notice they sent spies. So enemies look for opportunity. Enemies send spies. And these spies pretend to be honest men. Now, that's one of the hardest things for me because I really look for honesty in people around me. And Jesus did too. Jesus looked for honesty around him. And this goes back to Proverbs, all right? You can look up the verse that a king should surround himself with honest people. Jesus looked for honest people around him. So these people pretended to be honest. Now, I'm going to be straight up with you. People who pretend to be honest probably appear more honest than people who don't pretend to be honest, the people who are just honest. And the reason I say that is everybody messes up. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does something. I mean, please, we are human beings. We are flawed. We have feet of clay. But people pretending to be honest, they are so careful about appearances. So you have to be careful with the pretenders in life. They tried to get Jesus to say something. I notice these honest men, the pretenders tried to get Jesus to say something. So again, these pretender honest people around you will be trying to get you to say something that they can use against you. That can be reported to the Roman governor so he could arrest Jesus. Teacher, they said, we know that you speak what is and teach what is right and are not influenced by what others think. You teach the way of God truthfully. Beware of sip. Always beware of sip. Okay, when sip begins to flow, take one step back. Seriously, take a physical step backwards. When people begin to sip. Now tell us, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? This is a loaded question. It's emotional. Remember, this is a conquered people. The taxes are not going to develop Israel. The taxes are going to Rome. So these are a conquered people. So this is, if Jesus says this, the people are going to turn on him. Okay, so again, questions to turn the people against Jesus. Now, there's an old saying in the world's wisdom, it's not God's wisdom. The world's wisdom says, you must destroy the reputation. You must destroy the man before you kill the man. And the world lives by that. You have to destroy the man before you kill the man. So when people are out to get you, in the ministry. And there will be people like this in the future. I mean, please, we're no different than our Savior. When people are out to get you, they want to destroy your name. They want to destroy you before they can remove you or kill you. All right? So this is an emotional question. And notice, these things come from the pretenders among us. But Jesus saw through their trickery. Eyes to see. This is something you always have to be careful to have, eyes to see. Show me a Roman coin whose picture and title are stamped on it. Caesar's, they replied. Well, then, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. Whose picture? No offering with Roman coins, because they considered this idolatry. To this day, the Jews do not have a picture on a coin of a human being. They have pictures of trees. They do not have a picture of a bird, of a cow, of a human. They consider all of that idolatry. That's carried forward to this day. Well, then Jesus said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar's and give to God what belongs to God. So they failed to trap him by what he said in front of the people. Now, again, I want you to notice the pretenders ask trick questions. Let's not say trick, let's say trap questions. Only in public. Again, if the point is to destroy the person before they remove the person. Instead, they were amazed by his answer and they became silent. This is one of those verses before I got saved that make me fall in love with Jesus. I just thought, would you look at the wisdom that he speaks with? Then Jesus was approached by some Sadducees, religious leaders who say there is no resurrection from the dead. They posed this question: Teacher, Moses gave us a law that if a man dies leaving a wife with no children, his brother would marry. Now notice, Moses gave us a law. So number one, they want him to attack Moses. Remember, they keep trying to say that he's trying to destroy the law. So they want him to attack Moses. That if a man dies, leaving a wife with no children, his brother should marry the widow and have a child who will carry on the brother's name. Well, suppose there are 7 brothers, and the oldest one married and then died without children. So the second brother married the widow, and she also died. Then the third brother married. This continued with all 7 of them who died without children. Finally, the woman also died. So tell us, whose wife will she be in the resurrection? For all 7 were married to her. Now, I want you to notice something. Error looks for error, not truth. There's got to be something wrong with this teaching because, after all, this is our logic. This could happen. This could potentially happen. So error looks for error, not truth, and it's usually hypothetical. Jesus replied, marriage is for people here on earth, okay? No marriage in heaven. But in the age to come, those worthy of being raised from the dead, now notice, those worthy, thank God we're made worthy, those worthy of being raised from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and they will never die again, okay? So we are immortal. In this respect, they will be like angels. All right. So angels, you saw 2 characteristics of angels. Not sexual and never die. Angels are immortal. Angels have a beginning. Only God is eternal. Angels have a beginning, but no end. You and I are immortal. We have a beginning, but we have no end. So he said, now listen, you're just going to have to understand something. You don't understand the future. You have a doctrinal issue. You don't believe in the resurrection because you don't understand the human body after resurrection. So now, as to whether the dead will be raised, even Moses proved this. All right, he comes back. Now remember, he's proving Moses. He is not disputing Moses. He's using Moses. And here's a great thing to use in when people come up and they want to attack you about something. Well, do you believe what Jesus said? Use Jesus's words. Do you believe what Moses said? Jesus used Moses's words. Even Moses proved this when he wrote about the burning bush, long after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had died. He referred to the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So he is the God of the living, not the dead, for they are all alive to him. They are all alive to him. Now, well said, teacher, remarked one of the teachers of the religious law who was standing there. And no one dared ask him any more questions. So here is an honest heart. Now, I want you to remember, not all the teachers of the religious law were against Jesus. Not all the members of the Sanhedrin were against Jesus. Remember the guy who will later go and ask for his body and prepare him for burial? He was a member of the Sanhedrin. Okay, so there were people there with honest hearts. Then Jesus presented them with a question. Now who is the them? The them is the Sadducees. Okay, so verse 27. He presented them with a question. He's talking to the Sadducees, the guys who don't believe in the resurrection. Why is it, he asked, that the Messiah is said to be the son of David? For David himself wrote in the book of Psalms, the Lord said to my Lord, sit in the place of honor at my right hand until I humble your enemies, making them a footstool under your feet. Since David called Messiah Lord, how can the Messiah be his son? Now, he just asked them a question that they had never thought about in their whole life. And he silenced them. Then, with the crowds listening, all right, so the crowds are listening, he turned to his disciples. Now, I want you to notice there is two audiences. There's the crowd listening, and then there are the disciples. He's speaking this to the disciples. He's saying, all right, those of you that are with me, the 12, beware of these teachers of the religious law. So he says this publicly. He said, well, did Jesus ever criticize anybody publicly? With the crowds listening. Beware of these teachers of the religious law, for they like to parade around in flowing robes. Okay, this is what they like to do. And they love, all right, so here's like and here's love. They like to parade around in flowing robes, and they love to receive respectful greetings as they walk in the marketplaces, and how they love the seats of honor in the synagogues and the head table at banquets. Yet, they shamelessly cheat widows out of their property and then pretend to be pious by making long prayers in public. Because of this, they will be severely punished. Now, I want you to notice something here. Religion cheats widows. Now, one of the things you have to be very, very careful of in the world, as pastors, you have to go way out of your way to make sure that you never take advantage of a widow. There are widows, and they've never made financial decisions, especially in Jesus's day. But even like with my mama never handled the money. Mama had no clue how to handle the money. So especially in Jesus's day, where women really did not do business much and they really didn't handle the finances, these guys took advantage. These women looked to religious leaders as someone they could trust. And instead of being trustworthy, they cheated these women out of their property. Now, you've got to be careful with that. And there's so many things that go on out there. There's the television preachers that, please forgive me, they speak to that widow all alone at home watching the TV set. and they manipulate that poor woman into giving more money than she should ever give. I mean, they're not trying to get that woman to sow a seed. They're manipulating that woman because that woman feels like this television preacher is the only person who ever speaks to her life. And then they go after them and they go, okay, we want you to turn over your entire inheritance to this ministry or to this church. And you're going to sign everything over that when you die, everything. Don't ever do stuff like that. I mean, please, I've watched it. I've watched it in my own family. I despise it. You have to learn to stay away from it, okay? They shamelessly cheat widows. Now, folks, if there's anybody that you should be careful about ever accepting a donation from or accepting anything from, it's a widow, because a widow is all alone. She's easy to manipulate. She's lonely. You want to be very, very careful about these people who go around and shamelessly cheat widows and then pretend to be pious by making long prayers. Notice, pretend. And you ought to make a list of pretenders in the Bible. It's a fascinating list to make. Now, notice the consequences. Because of this, they will be severely punished. All right, so notice stronger punishment. Everybody does not get equal amounts of punishment in hell. There are stronger punishments. And sometimes we think that the rapists and the murderers, they get the worst, but I sometimes think that these pretender religious people who extort money and take advantage of people in the name of God, I sometimes think the hottest places in hell are reserved for them. Something to meditate on. Chapter 21. While Jesus was in the temple, he watched the rich people dropping their gifts in a collection box. Then a poor widow came by and dropped in 2 copper coins. Now, do not allow context to be lost on you. Widow. Do not allow the context to be forgotten. Then a poor widow came and dropped in 2 copper coins. So widows can give, but widows should never be cheated. I tell you the truth, because a widow has to give too, or she's going to be in need. All right, you reap what you sow. I tell you the truth, Jesus said, this poor widow has put in more, has given more than all the rest of them. For they have given a tiny part of their surplus. But she, poor as she is, has given everything she has. This is the definition of generosity. Now, this is how God sees. How God sees offerings. And he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Now, pastors, as one day of Jesus tarries, you're all pastoring great churches. Don't look at the offerings. Don't go around and figure out who the biggest donors in the church are, please, because you don't know the biggest donors of the church, and you will never know the biggest donors in the church. Well, I know who gave 1 million pesos. That might have been the smallest offering in the church that day in God's eyes. You as a pastor, you as a pastora, have to see the offerings as Jesus sees the offerings. Jesus sees the generosity. Jesus doesn't care about the amount. I mean, please, God owns the earth, the fullness thereof, the cattle on 1,000 hills, the silver, the gold. Is it? Please. You know, I used to laugh and say, if God wanted to, he could create a diamond planet. And then I read in the news that they had discovered a solid diamond planet. He already created bling in the universe. You cannot see offerings by the zeros. You must see offerings by the heart. The most generous givers otherwise you're going to offend the most generous givers in the church. The most generous givers in the church are the givers of sacrifice, not the givers of millions. And I'll be straight up with you. You will never grow a church with rich people, because rich people, and I want you to notice, rich people, this is how the rich give. Now notice, we're talking about rich people. This is how the rich give. The rich give a tiny part of their surplus. You can never grow a church with people giving a tiny part of their surplus. Well, Pastor, if a tiny part of their surplus is 10 million pesos, man, just with a few church members, I can do great things for God. Nope, it will never be blessed of God because there's no generosity. You build a church with people like this, with people who sacrifice. You build a church with generous-hearted people, not with rich people who give a tiny part of their surplus, and they don't even miss it, okay? I will never forget years ago, a person in our leadership said, Pastor, you ask us to give this, and I don't even feel that. And I thought, you just missed the whole thing. They didn't even feel it. This little lady, she felt it. Some of the disciples began talking about the majestic stonework of the temple and the memorial decorations on the walls. But Jesus said, the time is coming when all these things will be completely demolished, not one stone left upon another. Now notice, later he was accused of saying he would destroy the temple. He never said he would destroy. Now, this is why I often think this came from Judas. Twisted. Okay, because remember, Jesus is talking to the disciples. It's just a small group of them standing there. Okay, and just some, not even all of them, just some. Now, later on, when he's standing before the Sanhedrin, they accuse him of saying that he would tear down the temple. But he never said that. Now, dishing dirt. You're going to find that if you're going to be a part of a rebellion, the people who are leading the rebellion always want you to dish dirt. They want you to come out and say something that's really ugly and really nasty so that they know that you're with them and that you've committed yourself with them. And everybody will see that you hate Jesus and you're with them, okay? So I think what you have here is Judas dishing dirt. And it's twisted. Jesus never said he would destroy it. Jesus said the time is coming when all these things will be completely demolished and not one stone left upon another. But notice, he's only speaking to his disciples. He did not say this publicly. He's just talking to some of the disciples. So this was not public teaching. This accusation that the Sanhedrin brought against Jesus had to have come from one of the disciples. And the only disciple who was with him or with them is Judas. Be careful when people want you to dish dirt. Teacher, they ask, when will all this happen? What sign will show us that these things are about to take place? He replied, don't let anyone mislead you. All right, so people can mislead us. We can be misled. For many will come in my name, claiming. Here's claims. And you ought to make a list of all the things people claim in the Bible. I am the Messiah, and saying the time has come. Don't believe them. For when you hear of the wars and insurrections, don't panic. Yes, these things must take place first. So these things must. Okay, so when you hear of wars, insurrections, these things must take place first. But the end won't follow immediately. Then he added, nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes, there will be famines and plagues in many lands, and there will be terrifying things and great miraculous signs from the heaven. Okay, all of these things are going to happen first. The world we live in, I believe we're coming toward the rapture and the second coming of Jesus. But before all this occurs, there will be a time of great persecution. You will be dragged into synagogues and prisons, and you will stand trial before kings and governors because you are my followers. But this will be your opportunity to tell them about me. Now, I want you to understand, when you put all this together in context, this not only shows us second coming, this shows us Jerusalem in 70 AD. The great persecution under Paul, then later the great persecutions under James, and then James's death in 63 AD, and the destruction of the temple, flattened to the ground in 70 AD. He said, you'll be dragged into synagogues and prisons, and you'll stand trial before kings and governors because you're my followers. But this will be your opportunity. All right. So persecution is an opportunity, not a penance. Let's call it a penance. Let's say not a punishment. God, what have I done wrong that this is happening to me? Don't look on persecution as punishment from God. Look upon persecution as an opportunity to tell people about Jesus. So don't worry in advance about how to answer the charges against you, for I will give you the right words and such wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to reply or refute you. All right? Just like Jesus. All the times they tried to trap him with questions, they knew his answers. Okay. He said, I will give you. He will give you the words. Now, again, these are words for in the time of persecution. These are not words to preach with. All right. Okay. These are words for persecution. And don't worry about it. If you're being persecuted, don't worry about it. He will give you words and wisdom. Notice, words and wisdom, two gifts. Even those closest to you, your parents, brothers, relatives, and friends, will betray you. They will even kill some of you, and everyone will hate you because you're my followers. Okay, this is life in the ministry. You know, people always wonder, why aren't preachers the most popular people and the most trusted people in the world? Because the world hates us. You know, I'm sorry. Now, I know there are crooked preachers. Please, I get that. But if you think ministry is a path to popularity, you are sadly mistaken. But not a hair of your head will perish by standing firm. Wow. Here's the fruit of proper conduct during persecution. By standing firm, you will win your souls. Verse 20. And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you will know that the time of its destruction has arrived. Now, this is what they call a twofold prophecy, a double prophecy. This is 70 AD, and this will also be Great Tribulation. Those in Judah must flee to the hills, those in Jerusalem must get out, and those in the country must not return to the city. For those days will be days of God's vengeance, and the prophetic words of scriptures will be fulfilled. How terrible it will be for the pregnant women and for nursing mothers in those days. For there will be disaster in the land and great anger against this people, great anger against the Jewish people. Great anger against the Jewish people. They will be killed by the sword or sent away as captives to all the nations of the world. And again, this occurred in 70 AD. And again, this is also going to be during the Great Tribulation. And Jerusalem will be trampled down by the Gentiles until the period of the Gentiles comes to an end. Now, this goes back to Daniel. The period of the Gentiles comes to an end. And there will be strange signs in the sun, moon, and stars. And here on earth, the nations will be in turmoil, perplexed by the roaring seas and strange tides. Okay, roaring seas. So you're going to have storms. You're going to have strange tides. You're going to have tsunamis. People will be terrified at what they see coming on the earth, for the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then everyone will see the Son of Man. Here's the second coming. Then everyone will see the Son of Man coming on a cloud with great power and glory. So when all these things begin to happen, stand up, look up, your salvation is near. So this is at the end of the Great Tribulation. Now, I want you to notice one of the great distinctions between the rapture and the second coming. The rapture, nobody sees Jesus except us as we rise to meet him in the clouds. Okay? Great Tribulation, everyone will see the Son of Man. The Antichrist, the false prophet, the armies of China, the armies of Africa, the armies of the Antichrist, all of the Jewish people, every eye will see him. Okay, and that's what turns the armies to finally decide to fight together and stop fighting against each other, because there in the Battle of Armageddon, originally it comes with China and Africa in a pincer movement against the armies of the Antichrist. It's a great world war. They join together when they see Jesus coming. Then he gave them this illustration. Notice the fig tree or any other tree. When the leaves come out, you know without being told that summer is near. Okay, now we don't see that too much because we don't have changing seasons much here in the Philippines. But for instance, a few weeks ago, the termites began to fly. And you know how when the termites fly, you go get your bucket of water and you put it out under a light and then you collect the termites so that they don't get into the house. And there's a lot of termites down here in the South. The termites begin to fly. And I told my wife, well, it's rainy season now because the termites always fly right at the beginning of rainy season. They kind of announce rainy season. And sure enough, I think the day later, they announced rainy season has arrived. Okay. So we understand, maybe we don't know leaves, but we understand things. Or like, you know, as the winds begin to blow real strong around March, we realize, okay, cool season's over. We're entering into hot season now. There are things that we all understand. In the same way, when you see all these things taking place, you can know that the kingdom of God is near. I tell you the truth, this generation, this race, we're not talking about 40 years. This is not 40 years. This race will not pass from the scene until all these things have taken place. Do you know how many times people have tried to annihilate the Jewish people? Have you ever noticed how Judaism, the Israeli people stay together? The Hebrew language is reborn. This race will not cease to exist until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will disappear, but my words will never disappear. Okay? Never discount Jesus's words. Now, please allow me to go to work on that for just a minute. Young pastors, we live in a world where there are so many preachers saying, you don't have to do what Jesus said because Jesus lived under the law. So you don't need to pay attention to what Jesus said. You know, you pay attention to Paul and you pay attention to the epistles. You know, I've had people tell me that almost all of my life. Almost from the time I was born again, people have told me that. And from the time I was a baby Christian, I used to tell people, you know what? Jesus died for me. I'm going to listen to what Jesus said. And forgive me, but Jesus said, my words will never disappear. Now, I know Paul's words are inspired by the Holy Spirit and Peter and John's words are inspired by the Holy Spirit. Please, I get all that. But I sometimes wonder if we treat Jesus's words on the same level as everybody else. And I find it so strange that people are willing to discount what Jesus said. Jesus said, my words will never disappear. Maybe, and if you wonder, one of the reasons I wanted to do this 30 days with Jesus, it's part of this. You know, people are so discounting what Jesus said. Jesus said, my words will never disappear. Watch out. Don't let your hearts be dulled, all right? Don't allow. So this is the list. Things not to allow. Don't allow your hearts to be dulled by carousing and drunkenness. Now, drunkenness is self-explanatory. Carousing, that is clubbing. Now, again, the preponderance of Scripture on drinking. Hearts are dulled by carousing and drunkenness. Hearts are dulled. You know, I had a friend who pastored a church. I wouldn't call him a friend. I call him an acquaintance. We'd done conferences together. And he really was going after me about this position I take on as Christians don't drink. And I said, well, forgive me, but if you were to ask me to rename your church, and he was mocking me a little bit, so I returned the favor. Probably shouldn't have, but I returned the favor. I said, you know, maybe we should rename your church the First Church of the Dull Hearts. And he said, why would you say such a thing? And I took him to the scripture. I said, Jesus said, don't let your hearts be dulled by carousing and drunkenness. He said, oh, the Bible doesn't say that. I said, it says it right here. Maybe you should read the words of Jesus and not just try to take one verse from the Apostle Paul and create a theology of drunkenness from it. Now, if you want church members to have dull hearts, and have you ever noticed Christians that drink are very dull spiritually? Have you ever noticed that? Okay. Dulled by clubbing, drunkenness, and by the worries of this life. So there are three things that dull the heart. The worries of this life. This is why Jesus did so much teaching on overcoming the cares of life. Don't let that day catch you unaware like a trap, for that day will come upon everyone living on the earth. Keep alert. He said, don't let your hearts be dulled. Keep alert at all times, and pray that you might be strong enough to escape from these coming horrors and stand before the Son of Man. Every day, Jesus went to the temple to teach. This is Holy Week. Every day, Jesus went to the temple to teach, and each evening he returned to spend the night on the Mount of Olives. He went to Bethany. The crowds gathered at the temple early each morning to hear him, not the 12. They gathered to hear Jesus every day, each morning, early every morning. So somehow you need to change your concept of Holy Week from, Jesus was kind of kicking back and relaxing and, just walking around doing not much of anything, just marking time before he died. No, he was very busy. This was the only thing I could describe this by is this would have been like Nehemiah's revival, only maybe greater. As Jesus stood in the temple courts and the great crowds came to hear him, and he healed the sick and he cast out devils and he opened blind eyes and he healed the cripple. But most of the time he was teaching them. Chapter 22, verse 1. The festival of unleavened bread, which is called Passover, was approaching. The leading priests and teachers of the law were plotting how to kill Jesus, but they were afraid of the people's reaction. Again, religious politicians fear the people. That's, again, the difference between a man or a woman of God and a religious politician. Everybody wants to be loved by the people. That's just normal being human. But politicians fear. But I also want you to notice, in a time of forgiveness, plotting murder. This is Passover. This is coming to the Day of Atonement. In a time when everyone is going to be celebrating forgiveness and being right with God, they're planning murder. Now, forgive me, the irony of that is just almost too much to bear. Then Satan entered Judas Iscariot. Okay, so this is before the Last Supper. The Last Supper starts down here, before the Last Supper. And I'd have to look up what day. Because when you put all of this together, you can define the day. I think the day was Tuesday, but don't quote me on that. But Satan has already entered into Judas, who was one of the 12 disciples. Now, Satan entered him, and he went to the leading priests, captains of the law, to discuss the best way to betray Jesus to them. All right, so betrayal is a fruit of possession. He didn't betray Jesus, and then Satan entered in. Satan entered in, and then he betrayed Jesus. Maybe you're getting a little bit more of a clue why Jesus would look at him and call him friend. Now, they were delighted and promised to give him money. All right, I want you to notice, enemies reward betrayal. Enemies will always give money to betrayers. Enemies, if you are ever tempted to betray, just remember, when they give you the money, oh, we'll help support you. Enemies always reward betrayal. So he agreed and began looking for an opportunity. Now again, looking for an opportunity. Opportunities for betrayal. So they could arrest him when the crowds weren't around. Now, the festival of unleavened bread had arrived, and when the Passover lamb is sacrificed. Jesus sent Peter and John ahead and said, "Go and prepare the Passover meal so we can eat it together." "Where do you want us to prepare it?" they asked him. He replied, "As soon as you enter Jerusalem, a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you." All right, now, when they come up out of the Kidron Valley, if this is the Kidron Valley, and this is Temple Mount, and this is the old city of Jerusalem down here, and this is the major city of Jerusalem now. When they come up out of the Kidron Valley, the first area they're going to enter into is this area over right in here, where we always go to visit the upper room. And these are some of the things you learn when you get there, that now these scriptures make more sense. Right as they would come up out of the Kidron Valley, they would be standing there. If you turn to the right, there's the temple, but right there ahead of you would have been the old quarter of the city that is called the Essene community. Now, the Essenes, these were very devout Jews that really loved God. Okay, these are the people that we get the Qumran scrolls from later on. All right. Now, why do we know it's the Essene community? Because there's a man carrying a pitcher of water. They never married. They were celibates. In that day, men never carried water. The only men who carried water were celibate, were men who never married. So they were part of this Essene community. "Follow him. At the house he enters, say to the owner, 'The teacher asks, where is the guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples?'" I notice the teacher asked. You didn't have to say, "Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God." The teacher asked. Everybody knew who they represented. All right. So disciples, the apostles, were known followers because everybody saw them with Jesus every day. The teacher asked, "Where is the guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples?" "He will take you upstairs to a large room that is already set up." Everybody, notice that means no leaven. Okay, the room has had to be ceremonially cleansed of leaven. No yeast can be in that room. "That is where you should prepare our meal." They went off to the city and found everything just as Jesus had said, and they prepared the Passover meal there. When the time came, Jesus and the apostles sat down together at the table. And Jesus said, "I have been very eager to eat this Passover meal with you before my suffering begins." So notice, forefront of his mind. Forefront of Jesus' thinking. He knows what's coming. "For I tell you now that I won't eat this meal again until its meaning is fulfilled in the kingdom of God." What is the meaning of the Passover meal? This is why we don't celebrate Passover meal. We don't sit down and have a Seder meal. We celebrate Jesus. Okay, Jesus is the Passover lamb. Then he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it and said, "Take this and share it among yourselves. I shall not drink wine again until the kingdom of God has come. Now, I want you to notice, in some instances of communion, the wine is first, and in others, the bread is first. I'm not sure the order really matters. Okay? So go back and put the order, put all verses of order of communion together. And you're going to find here we have the cup of wine first. And then we have the bread. Others, the bread is first and the cup is second. Now, I remember when I got a hold of this and I thought, I'm going to just try something different one week. And I did the cup first and then the bread. Grabe talaga. People said, Pastor Sumrall has gone to the dark side. Pastor Sumrall has turned away from God. And I just thought, oh my goodness. There were just some people who hated me. They were a group of people called the Barkada. And Joey's smiling because he remembers those days. It was just so funny. And I was just thinking, well, obviously it doesn't matter. Just like whether you're baptized in Jesus' name or baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, both of them are listed. So don't get yourself all caught up in which one comes first, all right? For I will not drink wine again until the kingdom of God has come. Now, again, the wine. In a Passover meal, because there was no leaven, there could be no yeast. What is required for there to be fermentation in wine? Yeast. There could be no yeast in a Passover meal. In Jesus' day, the Passover meal was usually served, and the wine for the drink, the fresh wine or juice or new wine or whatever name you want to use it for, was usually done by either a servant outside or oftentimes as a gesture of humility, the host themselves would take the grapes and squeeze them fresh right there into the cup in front of everybody. So when people say Jesus drank alcohol at the Last Supper, no, he did not. Okay? This would have been freshly squeezed either by a servant outside or by one of the apostles or somebody. It would have been freshly squeezed into the cup. There was no leaven allowed at a Passover meal. This is why the room had to be cleansed of it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." After supper, he took another cup. Now this is after supper. After supper, he took another cup of wine and said, "This cup is the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed by my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for many." All right, so here we have one cup, we have bread, and now we have the second cup. So should we have communion with two cups? I mean, please, there's things that Jesus is trying to make a point of here, but communion is the cup and the bread. This cup is the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed. Now, this is the important part. The covenant is confirmed by my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you. But sitting here at table, sitting among us as a friend, wow, is the man who will betray me, all right? I want you to notice betrayers. They sit among us as a friend. Sorry, you're going to have to just deal with that. Betrayers are among us, and let's just break it into two parts to make the point. Among us, that shows access, that shows proximity, and they're among us as a friend. They're not among us as an enemy. They're not there as a spy. They're among us as a friend. Betrayal comes from friends. Wow. For it has been determined that the Son of Man must die, but what sorrow awaits the one who betrays him? This is the future of Judas. The disciples began to ask each other, which of them would ever do such a thing? Now, they're confronted with the fact that They know Jesus doesn't lie. And if Jesus said one of them is going to betray him, one of them as a friend is going to betray them, they knew he's telling the truth. And so they're going, my goodness, is it me? Is it you? Who do you think it is? Then they began to argue among themselves about who would be the greatest. Okay, this is argue about the future. Now, first, they're asking each other who would betray. Again, notice the context. There's a great sermon in here. So first, they debate betrayal, and then they debate greatness. The fickleness of the human heart. It's like a switch. In 1 second, oh, is it you? Is it me? Is it you? Is it me? And then how quickly that turns to pride and arrogance. How quickly the heart switches to pride and arrogance out of, oh, would it be me? In this world, the kings and great men lord it over their people, yet they are called friends of the people. Yet. You had to go meditate on that one. But among you, it will, not it might be, it will be different. Those who are the greatest among you should take the lowest rank, and the leader should be like a servant. When you go with us to Israel, you should take that opportunity to serve the people. Help them load their luggage off and on the buses. Help them get their luggage off the carousels at the airport. Help them find what they need to find. Oh, listen, let me take you around. I know a shop over here that can help you there. You should take the role of a servant. Now, not just on Israel tour, but every time you have an opportunity to serve the people. If you walk into a family's house and they're moving furniture, you know what? Help them move the furniture. If you walk into a house and there's mud on the floor from a flood, you know what? Help them clean up the mud. Jesus said, it will be different. Who is more important, the one who sits at the table or the one who serves? The one who sits at the table, of course, but not here. For I am among you as the one who serves. He is our example. Now, beloved, I know in the world, and especially coming out of some of the big mega churches, they teach this leadership concept of the people serve you. And the people, I've been in churches where when you finish preaching, a person walks up with a towel to dab the sweat on your brow. And another one hands you a glass of orange juice in a crystal glass. And another one comes to carry your Bible. And you know what? I just won't do that. I can wipe the sweat off my own forehead. I can get my own glass to drink with, and I can carry my own Bible. Thank you. Now, you know what? There may be a day when I need you to help me carry something. If Jesus tarries and I get really, really old, but it is not this day. Okay. At some point, every one of you has to determine in your heart, I am not a pastor to be served by people. I am here to serve. Pastor Joey can tell you about a place where we went after Yolanda, and we had a couple of trucks out there to unload all kinds of donated goods and food. And it was a pretty big download because we were downloading for a whole bunch of churches and using this one church as a pickup point. And these pastors said, come with us. We have a dinner all prepared for you. And they wanted me. Here we're bringing food for hungry people and they're making a banquet for me. Excuse me. Well, it turns out there'd been another religious leader from Manila through there just the week before. And he had brought no food, but they had given him great banquets. I said, no, I'm going to help the people unload. You know what? Those guys went in there and ate that food, and they did. I'm out there unloading the truck with the rest of we had board members there, we had pastors there, and we all just unloaded the truck together while those pastors stayed inside while our church members worked like dogs to unload the truck. Now, later on, there was a box of beautiful leather shoes. And those pastors came into the room later on, and they were already going for the leather shoes. And Pastor Pagadora saw it. And he said, no, those are for the church members. I was so proud of Joey that day. I could have popped all of my buttons. I was so proud. I said, yeah, Joey. Now, folks, you have to decide. Are you so fragile in your ego that you can't pick up a mop or a broom? Are you so fragile in your leadership position that you can't carry a sack of rice? Or are you secure enough in who you are in Christ that you, like Jesus, can be among the people as one who serves? Jesus said, you have stayed with me in my time of trial. And just as my Father has granted me a kingdom, I now grant you the right to eat and drink at my table in my kingdom. And you will sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. This is the promise of future authority given to the 12. Now, in the millennium, we will meet all of the apostles, because even though they're not from the 12 different tribes, they will actually rule the 12 tribes of Israel. People always say, why do you think Jesus chose 12? Because there were 12 tribes of Israel. He chose 12 apostles because each one of those apostles would rule one of the tribes of Israel, and he gave them that promise. He said, you have stayed with me. Okay, so the promise of authority flows to loyalty. The promise of authority flows to loyalty. And I'm going to stop there. Oh, my goodness. We will finish by Thursday morning. Father, your word is light, and your word is life. And it gives us understanding of things that we don't, when we just blow through it, Lord, we don't see the depth and the truth and the life. Continue to open our hearts to your word and give us a great day's rest. In Jesus' name, amen. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, everybody.